I sold my house to pay for my only son's wedding. At the ceremony, he grabbed the microphone and said, "I want to thank the woman who made all this possible," and pointed to his mother-in-law. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I'm 67 years old and I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I buried my husband 3 years ago after 42 years of marriage. I watched my mother waste away from cancer when I was just 25. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my only son publicly humiliated me at his own wedding. The morning started like any other wedding day should. I woke up early in my small apartment, the one I'd been renting since I sold my house 6 months ago. The house where Justin grew up, where he learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where we celebrated every Christmas morning. I sold it to pay for his dream wedding to Aria. $68,000. That's what I got after paying off the remaining mortgage. Every penny went toward their perfect day at the Riverside Country Club, complete with the string quartet Aria insisted on, the imported flowers, the 7-course dinner for 200 guests. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror that morning, applying lipstick with trembling hands. The dress I'd chosen was modest but elegant, navy blue with small pearl buttons. I'd bought it from a discount store, but it looked appropriate. I wanted to look like the proud mother of the groom, not like the woman who'd given up everything to make this day possible. The drive to the venue was quiet. I declined Justin's offer to include me in the wedding party transportation. "It's fine, honey," I told him when he mentioned it almost as an afterthought. "I'll drive myself." Truth was, I couldn't afford the hair and makeup session the other ladies were getting, and I didn't want to be a burden. At the country club, I found my assigned seat in the 3rd row. Not the front row where mothers of the groom typically sit, but I didn't complain. Aria had explained that they needed the front rows for her grandparents who were flying in from Italy. I understood. Family was important. Justin looked handsome in his black tuxedo, standing at the altar with his hands clasped behind his back. My heart swelled with pride watching him. This was my boy, the one I'd raised alone after his father died when he was just 15. The one I'd worked double shifts at the diner to put through college. The one who used to tell me I was his favorite person in the whole world. Aria floated down the aisle like something from a fairy tale. Her dress must have cost more than I made in 6 months at my old job. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Blonde hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless. That smile that Justin fell for the moment he met her 2 years ago. The ceremony was everything they dreamed of. The vows were personal and heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, I dabbed at my eyes with the tissue I'd tucked in my purse. Despite everything, I was happy for them. The reception was even more elaborate than I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk. The centerpieces were massive arrangements of white roses and baby's breath. Everything was perfect, elegant, expensive. Worth every penny of my house sale, I told myself. I sat at table 12 with some distant relatives of Aria's family. They were polite but didn't include me much in conversation. I picked at my salmon and tried to enjoy the classical music from the string quartet. This was my son's special day, and I was just grateful to be here. Then came the speeches. Aria's father went first, telling funny stories about her childhood and welcoming Justin to their family. Then her maid of honor shared embarrassing tales from college that made everyone laugh. I kept waiting for someone to mention me, to acknowledge the woman who'd raised the groom. But speech after speech passed without a word. Finally, Justin stood up. My heart jumped. This was it. This was when he'd thank me, when he'd tell everyone about the sacrifices I'd made, when he'd acknowledge that none of this would have been possible without his mother. He cleared his throat and smiled at the crowd. "Good evening, everyone. Aria and I are so grateful to have all of you here tonight to celebrate with us." The room quieted, all attention focused on my handsome son. "Before we continue with the evening, there's someone very special I need to thank. Someone who made all of this possible through her incredible generosity and love." My breath caught. I sat up straighter, smoothing my dress. This was my moment. I want to thank the woman who welcomed me into her family with open arms, who supported our relationship from day one, and who provided the means for us to have this perfect wedding. I felt tears pricking my eyes. Finally, after months of feeling overlooked and underappreciated, Justin was going to acknowledge what I'd done for them. He raised his champagne glass and turned toward the head table. Mom, Katherine, thank you for everything. We couldn't have done this without you. The room erupted in applause as Justin pointed directly at Aria's mother, who stood up gracefully and blew him a kiss. Katherine smiled radiantly, her hand pressed to her heart in a gesture of humble gratitude. I felt the world tilt sideways. Katherine hadn't paid for anything. I knew this because I'd written every single check myself. I'd sat in my realtor's office signing papers to sell the house I'd called home for 27 years. I watched my savings account drain to zero. I'd moved into a tiny apartment and taken a part-time job at the grocery store to pay my rent. But as I looked around the room, watching 200 people applaud Aria's mother for my sacrifice, I realized something devastating. Justin wasn't mistaken. He wasn't confused about who paid for what. He was choosing to give Katherine credit for my sacrifice. The applause continued as Katherine dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, playing the role of the overwhelmed, generous mother perfectly. Aria beamed at her mother-in-law, then at Justin, and for just a moment, her eyes found mine across the room. She smiled. Not a warm, grateful smile. Not an apologetic smile for the misunderstanding. It was a smile of pure satisfaction, like someone who just won a game I didn't even know we were playing. I sat frozen in my chair, my untouched champagne glass growing warm in my hand. Around me, people were already moving on to the next part of the evening, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process what had just happened. My son had just publicly erased me from the biggest moment of his life. The band started playing, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. I watched as Justin took Aria's hand and led her into their first dance as husband and wife. They looked perfect together, spinning under the chandelier light, lost in their own world. A world that apparently didn't include his mother. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember gathering my purse or walking toward the exit. I just remember the cool night air hitting my face as I stepped outside the country club, my legs shaky beneath me. In the parking lot, I fumbled with my car keys, my hands trembling so violently I dropped them twice. When I finally got the door open, I collapsed into the driver's seat and let the tears come. 42 years of marriage, 27 years of single motherhood, and 67 years of trying to be a good woman, and this was what I had to show for it. A son who could look right through me and a daughter-in-law who smiled while he did it. As I drove home to my small apartment, past the neighborhood where my house used to be, I realized that tonight hadn't just been Justin's wedding day. It had been the day I learned exactly how little I meant to the person I'd given everything for. But what I didn't know yet was that this humiliation was just the beginning. Because Aria's satisfied smile hadn't been about winning some petty competition. It had been about executing a plan that would make sure I never posed a threat to her perfect life again. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was still replaying that moment in my head every single day. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning, my heart racing, hearing Justin's voice saying, "Mom, Katherine, thank you for everything," over and over again. I tried calling him twice since the wedding. Both times it went straight to voicemail. The first message I left was gentle, asking if we could talk about what happened. The second time I didn't leave a message at all. What was I supposed to say? "Hi honey. Just wondering why you publicly humiliated your mother at your wedding." I was working my shift at Friendly Foods grocery store, scanning items and trying to keep my mind occupied, when my phone buzzed. A text from Justin. My heart jumped with hope. "Mom, sorry I've been busy with honeymoon planning. Can you stop by the apartment tonight around 7? Aria wants to talk to you about something." Not, "I want to talk to you." Not, "We need to discuss what happened." Aria wanted to talk to me. Still, I was desperate for any chance to understand what had gone wrong. So I texted back that I'd be there. Their apartment was in the expensive part of town. A 2-bedroom unit with granite counters and a view of the river. The kind of place I could never afford even when I was married. I'd helped them with the security deposit when they first moved in together, another chunk of my dwindling savings. Aria answered the door wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked casual, comfortable, completely at ease. "Debbie, come on in. Justin's just finishing up a work call." I followed her into their living room, noting the new furniture that must have been wedding gifts. Everything was white and pristine like something from a magazine. I perched on the edge of their cream-colored sofa, afraid to relax into it. "Can I get you some wine?" Water? Arya asked, playing the perfect hostess. Water would be nice, thank you. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I could hear her moving around, the sound of cabinets opening and closing. When she returned with my water, she settled into the armchair across from me with her own glass of white wine. So, she said, taking a sip, I wanted to clear the air about the wedding. My pulse quickened. Finally, we were going to address what happened. I appreciate that, Arya. I was confused about Justin thanking my mother instead of you, she finished, her voice matter of fact. I figured you would be. I set my water glass down carefully. Yes. I don't understand why he would do that when I'm the one who paid for everything. Arya nodded, swirling her wine in her glass. Right. See, here's the thing, Debbie. Justin and I talked about that a lot while we were planning the wedding. Talked about what? About how to handle the money situation. Because honestly, it was getting uncomfortable. I felt my stomach start to knot. Uncomfortable how? Arya leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more serious. Well, you kept bringing up how much everything cost. Every time we picked out flowers or decided on the menu, you'd mention the price. It made us feel guilty, like we were being selfish. I never meant to make you feel guilty. I just wanted to make sure we were being responsible with the budget. But see, that's the thing, Arya continued. It wasn't your budget to manage. We're adults, Debbie. We can make our own decisions about our wedding. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. But I'm the one who paid for it. Of course I should have input on the budget. Nobody asked you to pay for it. The words hit me like ice water. I opened my mouth to respond, but she kept talking. Don't get me wrong, we were grateful for your offer. But the way you handled it made us feel like we owed you something. Like you were holding it over our heads. That's not what I was doing at all. I wanted to give you both a beautiful wedding. And we appreciate that. But my parents offered to help too, and they did it without making us feel guilty about every decision. So when it came time for the speeches, Justin thought it would be better to thank my mother instead. Less complicated. I felt like I was drowning. Less complicated? Arya, I sold my house to pay for your wedding. Your mother didn't contribute a penny. Actually, she did. She paid for the rehearsal dinner, the flowers for the church, and the transportation for out-of-town guests. That came to almost $15,000. I knew for a fact that wasn't true. I had paid for all of those things. I had the receipts in a folder at home. But looking at Arya's calm, confident expression, I started to doubt myself. I think there might be some confusion, I said slowly. I have all the receipts. I can show you. Debbie, Arya interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. I think you might be remembering things differently than they actually happened. This kind of thing is normal for women your age. My grandmother went through the same thing. Women my age. Like I was some confused old lady who couldn't keep track of her own finances. Just then, Justin walked into the room, still wearing his work clothes. Hey, Mom, he said, kissing the top of my head like nothing was wrong. How are you settling into the new place? I'm fine, I managed, though I felt anything but fine. Justin, honey, can we talk about what happened at the wedding? About the speech. He glanced at Arya, who gave him a small nod. What about it? You thanked Katherine for paying for the wedding, but I'm the one who sold my house to. Mom, Justin said, sitting down next to Arya and taking her hand. We've been over this. You helped, but so did Katherine. We wanted to thank everyone who contributed. But in your speech, you only thanked Katherine. You made it sound like she paid for everything. Justin sighed, the same exasperated sigh he'd given me as a teenager when I asked too many questions. Mom, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. It was just a speech. Just a speech. My voice cracked. Justin, I gave up my home for you. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment and working at a grocery store because I spent my savings on your wedding. And you thanked another woman for my sacrifice. Arya squeezed Justin's hand. See? This is exactly what we were talking about. What do you mean? I asked. The guilt trips, Arya said softly. You're doing it right now. Making us feel bad for having a beautiful wedding. Making us feel like we owe you something because you chose to help us. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. That's not what I'm doing. I just want my son to acknowledge what I did for him. And we do acknowledge it, Justin said. We're grateful, Mom. But you can't expect us to structure our entire wedding around thanking you. That's not what the day was about. I looked between them, these two people I tried so hard to help, and I realized they were united against me. They had their story and I was the villain in it. The demanding, guilt-tripping mother who couldn't just be happy for them. I think I should go, I said, standing up on unsteady legs. Don't leave upset, Arya said, but her tone suggested she was relieved I was leaving. We really do appreciate everything you did. Of course we do, Justin added, but he didn't get up to hug me goodbye. Drive safe, okay? I walked to my car in a daze, my mind reeling from what had just happened. They had turned my sacrifice into my fault. They had made me feel like I was the unreasonable one for expecting acknowledgement. But as I sat in my car outside their building, something nagged at me. Arya had been so prepared, so ready with her explanations. The way she'd led the conversation, the way Justin had followed her cues. It felt rehearsed. And that look in her eyes when she talked about women my age and memory problems. It wasn't concern. It was calculation. I started the engine and drove home, but instead of going straight to my apartment, I stopped at the 24-hour Kinko's downtown. I had kept every receipt, every contract, every piece of documentation from the wedding planning. If Arya wanted to play games with the truth, I was going to arm myself with facts. Back in my apartment, I spread everything out on my small dining table. Receipt after receipt, all in my name, all paid from my account. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the music, the photography. $68,000 in total. Katherine's name wasn't on a single document. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for the florist. It was late, but I left a voicemail asking them to call me back with confirmation of who had paid for the church flowers. Then I called the transportation company and left the same message. One by one, I was going to verify every single expense. Because something was very wrong here. And I was starting to suspect that Arya's satisfied smile at the wedding had been about more than just winning some petty competition for credit. It had been about something much more calculated, much more cruel. And if that was true, then what had happened at the wedding wasn't just about humiliation. It was about erasing me completely. The florist called me back the next morning, confirming what I already knew. Every single flower arrangement had been paid for by me, including the ones at the church. The transportation company told me the same thing. Katherine's name wasn't on any of their records. I felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I wasn't losing my mind. Dread because it meant Arya had deliberately lied to me, and Justin had gone along with it. I tried calling Justin again that afternoon, but it went straight to voicemail. This time I left a message. Honey, I have all the receipts from the wedding vendors. We need to talk about what really happened with the payments. Please call me back. He didn't. 3 days later, I received a text that made my blood run cold. Mom, Arya and I think it would be best if we took some space for a while. We need time to adjust to married life without outside pressure. We'll be in touch when we're ready. Outside pressure. That's what I had become to my own son. I stared at that message for an hour, reading it over and over. Then I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. On the third try, I got a message saying the number was no longer in service. He had changed his phone number. I drove to their apartment building, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The doorman, who had always been friendly when I visited before, looked uncomfortable when he saw me. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carson, but I have instructions not to allow you up to the apartment. Instructions from who? From the residents. Mr. and Mrs. Henley left specific instructions that you're not to be admitted to the building. Mrs. Henley. Arya had taken Justin's last name, but hearing it spoken out loud made everything feel more real, more final. Can you at least call up and let them know I'm here? The doorman shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry, ma'am. I have to follow their instructions. I stood in that marble lobby, feeling like a stranger being turned away from my own son's life. Other residents walked past me, their eyes curious but quickly averted. I was becoming a scene and embarrassment. Could you at least give them a message? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Of course. Tell them that his mother loves him and just wants to understand what went wrong. The doorman nodded sympathetically, But I could see in his eyes that he'd delivered messages like this before. Messages from family members who'd been cut off, who didn't understand why. I went home and sent an email to Justin's work address, the only way I could think of to reach him. I kept it short and simple, asking if we could meet for coffee to talk things through. The email bounced back within an hour. His company's system had blocked me. That's when I knew this wasn't just about needing space. This was about cutting me out completely. Over the next few weeks, I tried reaching out to other family members, hoping someone could help me understand what was happening. I called my sister Linda in Phoenix. "Oh honey," she said, her voice careful and measured. "I heard about what happened at the wedding." "What did you hear?" "Well, Arya called me. She was very sweet about it, very concerned. She said you'd been having some difficulties adjusting to their marriage, that you'd been making demands about the wedding planning that made them uncomfortable." My stomach dropped. "That's not what happened, Linda. She said you were having trouble remembering who paid for what, that you were claiming credit for things other people had contributed to." "I have receipts, Linda. I have documentation of every single payment I made." There was a pause. "Honey, are you sure you're remembering everything correctly? Arya seemed really worried about you. She said this kind of confusion is normal for women our age, especially after a major loss like selling your house." Women our age. The same phrase Arya had used. "Linda, I'm 67, not 97. My mind is perfectly fine." "Of course it is," Linda said quickly, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. "I'm just saying, maybe you should talk to someone. A counselor or your doctor. Sometimes stress can affect our memory in ways we don't realize." After I hung up, I sat in my small living room and tried to process what was happening. Arya wasn't just isolating me from Justin. She was systematically destroying my credibility with my entire family. A few days later, I ran into Margaret Clemens at the grocery store where I worked. Margaret had been my neighbor for 15 years before I sold the house. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Debbie, how are you, dear? I heard about the wedding drama. What did you hear?" Margaret's expression became sympathetic. "Oh honey. Arya stopped by to pick up some mail that was still being delivered to your old address. She told me what happened. How you'd gotten confused about the wedding expenses and made a scene at the reception." "I didn't make a scene, Margaret. I left quietly." "Well, she said you were upset because you thought you'd paid for everything, but it turned out other people had contributed too and you'd forgotten." I felt like I was in some alternate reality where up was down and black was white. "Margaret, I have all the receipts. I can prove." "Oh, sweetheart," Margaret interrupted, reaching out to pat my arm. "You don't have to prove anything to me. These things happen. My mother went through something similar when she was around your age. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Around my age." As if 67 was ancient, as if I was one step away from a nursing home. "Arya seems like such a lovely girl," Margaret continued. "So patient and understanding. She was really worried about you. She said she was trying to figure out how to help without making you feel embarrassed." I excused myself and finished my shift in a haze. Arya had been busy. Very busy. She wasn't just telling people I was confused or forgetful. She was painting herself as the caring daughter-in-law who was worried about her husband's unstable mother. That evening, I received a call from my cousin Ruth in Seattle. We only talked a few times a year, usually around holidays, so I was surprised to hear from her. "Debbie, I hope you don't mind me calling. I spoke with Linda, and she mentioned you were going through a difficult time." "Ruth, Listen, honey. I want you to know that what you're experiencing is more common than you think. When my friend Eleanor started having memory issues, her family had to have some hard conversations too." Memory issues. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. "I don't have memory issues, Ruth." "Of course not, dear. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that sometimes stress can make us remember things differently than they actually happened. Linda said your new daughter-in-law is trying to be supportive, but that you're having trouble accepting help." I hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next month, the pattern continued. Every family member, every old friend who reached out had the same story. Arya had contacted them, expressing concern about my mental state, my confusion about the wedding, my difficulty accepting their marriage. She was isolating me systematically, cutting off every relationship I had, every potential source of support. And she was doing it while making herself look like the victim of a demanding, unstable mother-in-law. The worst part was that it was working. I could hear it in people's voices when they talked to me. The careful tone they used, like they were speaking to someone fragile. The way they deflected when I tried to explain what really happened. I stopped going to church because I couldn't bear the pitying looks from the congregation. I stopped attending my book club because I overheard 2 members whispering about poor Debbie and her memory problems. I even avoided the grocery store on my days off because I couldn't handle running into more neighbors who'd heard Aria's version of events. By the end of the month, I was completely alone. No calls from Justin. No contact with extended family who all thought I was having some kind of breakdown. No friends who weren't looking at me with concern and pity. I sat in my small apartment every evening, surrounded by the receipts and documentation that proved I was telling the truth, but with no one left who believed me. Aria had done more than humiliate me at the wedding. She had systematically destroyed my reputation, my relationships, and my credibility. She had turned my own family against me, and made me look like an unstable old woman who couldn't handle her son's happiness. But what I didn't know yet was why. Why had she gone to such elaborate lengths to isolate me? What was she so afraid of that she needed to eliminate me entirely from Justin's life? The answer would come soon enough, and when it did, it would reveal something so disturbing about Aria's past that everything else would finally make sense. But first, I had to survive the complete destruction of my world. I was at my lowest point when the stranger appeared at my door. It had been 6 weeks since Justin changed his phone number. 6 weeks since I'd been banned from his apartment building. 6 weeks of living in complete isolation while my family and friends treated me like I was losing my mind. I'd started keeping a journal, writing down every conversation, every receipt, every piece of evidence that proved I wasn't crazy. Some nights I'd read through it just to reassure myself that I wasn't actually losing my grip on reality, the way everyone seemed to think I was. The knock came on a Tuesday evening while I was heating up a frozen dinner. I almost didn't answer it. The few visitors I'd had lately were either delivery drivers or neighbors who looked at me with that careful, pitying expression I'd grown to hate. But something made me open the door. The man standing there was about 50, with graying hair and tired eyes. He wore a rumpled suit and carried a manila folder under his arm. He looked like he hadn't slept well in days. "Mrs. Carson? Mrs. Debbie Carson?" "Yes. My name is Michael Bradley. I apologize for showing up unannounced, but I need to talk to you about Aria Henley, your daughter-in-law." I felt my heart skip. What about her? Could I come in? This isn't a conversation for the hallway. I hesitated. Months of isolation had made me wary of strangers, but there was something in his voice, a gravity that told me this was important. I let him in and offered him a seat on my small couch. He declined the offer of coffee or water and got straight to the point. "Mrs. Carson, I was engaged to Aria 3 years ago." The words hit me like ice water. Engaged. For 8 months. We lived together, planned a future together. I thought I knew her. He opened the manila folder and pulled out a photograph. "This is my mother, Helen Bradley." He handed me a picture of a woman who looked to be in her 70s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She was sitting in what looked like a garden, wearing a blue dress and holding a small dog. "She's beautiful," I said, not understanding why he was showing me this. "She was. She died last year." "I'm sorry for your loss." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. "She died alone, Mrs. Carson. Completely alone. And it's because of Aria." I set the photograph down carefully. "I don't understand. My mother was a widow like you. My father died when I was in college and she never remarried. She lived in the house I grew up in, the one my parents bought when they were newlyweds. It wasn't fancy, but it was paid off. And she had a decent savings account from my father's life insurance." He pulled out another document from the folder. "When I started dating Aria, she was fascinated by my family history. She asked a lot of questions about my mother, about the house, about her finances. I thought she was just trying to get to know my family. What happened? At first, Aria was perfect with my mother. She'd visit her, bring her flowers, help with grocery shopping. My mother was thrilled that I'd found someone so caring. She started talking about updating her will to include Aria, about how wonderful it would be to have a daughter-in-law who actually cared. My stomach started to twist. Then Arya started making suggestions. Little things at first. She thought my mother was too old to be living alone. She worried about her safety. She suggested that maybe my mother should move into a senior living facility, sell the house, and put the money somewhere safe. Did your mother want to move? No. She loved that house. She'd lived there for 45 years. But Arya was very persuasive. She found all these articles about elderly people falling in their homes, about break-ins in my mother's neighborhood. She made my mother terrified to stay where she was. Michael's hands were shaking as he pulled out more documents. Then Arya started working on me. She said my mother was becoming forgetful, that she'd repeat stories or forget things they talked about. She said she was worried about early signs of dementia. Was your mother having memory problems? That's what I started to believe, because Arya was so convincing. She'd tell me about conversations they'd had where my mother couldn't remember things. She'd express concern about my mother's ability to manage her finances. She suggested that maybe I should get power of attorney, just to protect her. I felt sick. What did you do? I confronted my mother about it. I asked her if she was having trouble remembering things, if she felt confused or overwhelmed. And you know what she said? I shook my head. She said she was fine, but that Arya kept telling her she was forgetting things. She said Arya would bring up conversations they'd supposedly had that my mother had no memory of. She said Arya was making her doubt her own mind. Oh God. I didn't believe her. I thought she was just being defensive about getting older. Arya seemed so genuinely concerned, so caring. She was always talking about how much she loved my mother, how worried she was about her well-being. Michael opened the folder again and pulled out what looked like medical records. I convinced my mother to see a doctor for a cognitive evaluation. Comprehensive testing. You know what they found? What? Nothing. Her mind was completely sharp. No signs of dementia, no memory problems, no cognitive decline whatsoever. The doctor said she had the mental acuity of someone 20 years younger. I stared at him, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. When I showed Arya the test results, she seemed disappointed. Not relieved like someone who genuinely cared about my mother's health would be. Disappointed. What did you do? I started paying closer attention. I started visiting my mother more often, without telling Arya I was coming. And I realized that my mother was fine when Arya wasn't around. She was sharp, articulate, completely herself. It was only when Arya was there that she seemed confused or forgetful. Arya was gaslighting her. Exactly. She was deliberately making my mother doubt her own memory, her own perceptions. She was isolating her from friends by telling them my mother was having problems. She was turning me against my own mother by convincing me that my mother needed help she didn't actually need. Michael's voice broke slightly. By the time I figured out what was happening, it was almost too late. My mother had become so isolated, so convinced that she was losing her mind, that she'd stopped trusting herself completely. She'd given me power of attorney. She'd started talking about selling the house. Did you confront Arya? I tried. But she was good, Mrs. Carson. Really good. She made it seem like I was the one who was confused, like I was turning against her for no reason. She said she was just trying to help my family, that she couldn't understand why I was being so hostile to someone who cared so much. What happened to your engagement? I broke it off. But by then the damage was done. My mother never fully recovered from what Arya put her through. She'd been so strong, so independent her whole life, and Arya had systematically destroyed her confidence in herself. She started second-guessing everything, doubting her own judgment. Michael wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She died 8 months later. Heart attack. But I know it was really a broken spirit. Arya had stolen her sense of self, her trust in her own mind. My mother died thinking she was a burden, thinking she was losing her memory when she wasn't. I felt tears streaming down my face. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been watching what's happening to you. I still live in the same town where Arya and I were together. I heard through mutual friends that she'd gotten married to someone with a mother who was a widow. I started asking around, and I heard the same story I lived through. He pulled out newspaper clippings from the folder. Arya Henley, formerly Arya Patterson, concerned about her elderly mother-in-law's confusion about wedding expenses. Arya Henley reaching out to family members worried about her mother-in-law's memory problems. Arya Henley being praised for her patience and understanding with a difficult family situation. She's doing it again. She's doing exactly what she did to my mother. And to God knows how many other women before that. I stared at the documents spread across my coffee table, my mind reeling. But why? What does she get out of it? Michael pulled out one final document. This is what I think she was after with my mother. It was a life insurance policy. For $250,000. My father left this to my mother. If she had died while Arya and I were married, and if my mother had updated her will like she was planning to, Arya would have inherited a significant amount of money. But you broke up with her before that happened. Yes, but I think that's her pattern. Find a man with a widowed mother who has assets. Isolate the mother, destroy her credibility, then position herself to inherit when the mother dies. I felt like I was going to be sick. What assets do I have that she could want? I don't know. But Mrs. Carson, I'm telling you this because you need to be very, very careful. If Arya is following the same pattern she used with my mother, isolation is just the first step. He gathered up his documents and put them back in the folder. I failed to protect my mother. I let Arya convince me that my mother was the problem. I'm not going to let that happen to another family if I can help it. He stood up to leave, then turned back to me. Mrs. Carson, you're not crazy. You're not forgetful. You're not having memory problems. You're being systematically manipulated by someone who's done this before. After he left, I sat in my living room staring at the business card he'd given me. Michael Bradley, private investigator. At the bottom he'd written a phone number and the words, "Call me if you need help." For the first time in weeks I didn't feel completely alone. But I also realized that what had happened at the wedding, what was happening to my relationship with Justin, was so much worse than I'd thought. Arya wasn't just a selfish young woman who wanted credit for my sacrifice. She was a predator who had targeted my family, and my son had no idea he'd married someone who was planning to destroy us both. After Michael left, I didn't sleep for 3 days straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Helen Bradley's kind face in that photograph, imagining her dying alone and convinced she was losing her mind. I thought about how Arya had smiled at the wedding when Justin thanked Katherine instead of me. It hadn't been satisfaction at winning some petty competition. It had been satisfaction at executing a plan. I called Michael on the 4th day. "I want to hire you," I said without preamble when he answered. "Mrs. Carson? I need to know everything about Arya. Her past, her patterns, what she's really after. And I need to know what she's planning next. Are you sure? This could get complicated." "Michael, your mother died alone because no one stopped Arya in time. I'm not going to let that happen to me. And I'm not going to let her destroy my son in the process." We met at a diner downtown that afternoon. Michael had already started putting together a file on Arya, and what he'd found made my blood run cold. "Her real name is Arya Patterson," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "She's 32 years old, originally from Ohio. She's been engaged 4 times in the past 10 years. 4 times. Always to men with widowed mothers who had assets. The pattern is almost identical every time." He opened the folder and showed me a timeline he'd created. First engagement was to David Chan in Ohio. His mother owned a successful restaurant and had a life insurance policy worth $300,000. Arya spent 8 months isolating Mrs. Chun from her friends and family, convincing everyone that the older woman was having memory problems. What happened? Mrs. Chun died of a stroke before the wedding. She'd updated her will to include Arya just weeks before. But David's sister contested the will, and Arya disappeared rather than fight it in court. My hands were shaking as I looked at the documents. Who was next? Robert Martinez in Colorado. His mother had inherited her husband's construction business. Same pattern. Arya convinced everyone that Mrs. Martinez was becoming incompetent, got Robert to give her power of attorney. But Mrs. Martinez's business partner got suspicious and hired a lawyer to investigate. Did Arya get anything? No. She broke the engagement and moved to Nevada before anyone could prove what she was doing. Michael turned the page to show me more photos. Then there was James Whitmore in Las Vegas. His mother had sold a successful bakery, and had almost $500,000 in the bank. Let me guess. Same pattern. Exactly. But Mrs. Whitmore was sharper than Arya expected. She started keeping a journal documenting every interaction with Arya. Every time Arya claimed she'd forgotten something or said something she hadn't said. When Mrs. Whitmore showed the journal to her son, he started to see what was happening. What did Arya do? She accelerated her timeline, started pushing harder, trying to convince James that his mother needed to be in a care facility. But James got suspicious and hired a private investigator. Michael nodded. That's how I first learned about Arya's pattern. James hired me to investigate her background, and I found the connections to the previous families. But by the time we had enough evidence to confront her, she was already gone. And then she moved here and found me. Actually, she moved here and found my mother first. I think she was getting desperate. Her previous attempts had failed and she needed money. My mother was an easier target because I was traveling a lot for work and wasn't around to supervise the relationship. I stared at the timeline, tracing Arya's path of destruction across multiple states. How long has she been planning this with Justin? Based on what I found, she started researching your family about 6 months before she met him. She knew about your husband's death, about the house you owned, about your savings. She targeted Justin specifically because he fit her preferred victim profile. Which is what? Only child of a widowed mother with assets. Someone who's been successful enough to feel guilty about his mother's sacrifices. Someone who can be convinced that his mother is becoming a burden or developing problems. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Arya hadn't fallen in love with Justin and then decided to go after my money. She'd identified me as a target and then seduced my son as a way to get to me. What is she after specifically? I asked. Michael pulled out another document. Based on public records, you had significant equity in your house, plus your husband's life insurance policy and your retirement savings. Even after paying for the wedding, you probably still have close to $100,000 in assets. That's all in CDs and my retirement account. She can't access those. Not while you're alive and competent. But if something happened to you, or if you were declared incompetent, and if Justin was your next of kin with power of attorney, she'd control everything through him. Exactly. And based on her pattern, she's very good at convincing men that their mothers need help managing their affairs. I felt sick. So the wedding humiliation, the isolation, making everyone think I'm losing my mind. It's all building toward getting Justin to take control of my finances. That's my assessment. She's setting the stage to have you declared incompetent, so she can access your assets through Justin. I stared out the diner window, watching normal people live their normal lives, completely unaware that predators like Arya existed in the world. What do? We document everything. We gather evidence of her pattern, her lies, her manipulation, and we wait for her to make a move. Wait? Michael, while we're waiting, she's turning my son against me more every day. I know it's hard, but we need her to reveal her true intentions before we can stop her. Right now it just looks like family drama. We need proof of criminal intent. Over the next few weeks, Michael and I worked together to build a case against Arya. He'd taught me how to document everything, how to save communications, how to gather evidence without tipping her off. The break came sooner than I expected. I was working my shift at the grocery store when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it. Mom. Justin's voice was strained, desperate. Justin? Honey, are you okay? I'm at the hospital. It's Arya. She had an accident. My heart dropped. What kind of accident? She fell down the stairs at our building. She's unconscious. They don't know how bad it is yet. Despite everything Arya had done to me, I felt genuine concern. Do you need me to come? Would you? I know things have been complicated between us, but I could really use my mom right now. I'm on my way. I found Justin in the hospital waiting room, looking younger than his 28 years. His hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled like he'd been there for hours. How is she? I asked, sitting beside him. Still unconscious. They're running tests. He rubbed his face with his hands. Mom, I'm so scared. I put my arm around him and for a moment he was just my little boy again. She's going to be okay, honey. I don't know what I'd do without her. She's everything to me. My heart broke a little, but I pushed aside my own feelings. This wasn't about me and Arya. This was about my son being scared. Is there anything you need? Have you eaten? I can't eat. I just keep thinking about our fight this morning. You had a fight? Justin nodded, tears in his eyes. She wanted me to ask you to sign some papers. Something about making sure your finances were protected in case anything happened to you. She said it was important for family security. I felt my blood turn to ice. What kind of papers? Power of attorney documents. She said since you've been having trouble with memory and managing money, it would be better if I could help you when you needed it. There it was. The move Michael and I had been waiting for. Justin, I said carefully, I haven't been having trouble with memory or managing money. But Arya said. Arya has been lying to you. He pulled away from me. Mom, don't start this now. My wife is fighting for her life. I'm not starting anything. I'm telling you the truth. The truth according to you. But everyone else says. Everyone else is saying what Arya told them to say. Justin stood up, agitation clear in his voice. This is exactly what she said would happen. She said you'd try to turn me against her when she was vulnerable. Justin, listen to me. I have proof. I don't want to hear it. His voice carried across the waiting room, drawing stares from other families. My wife might be dying, and you're trying to poison me against her. What kind of person does that? I stared at my son, seeing how completely Arya had programmed him against me. Even with her unconscious in a hospital bed, her manipulation was still working. You're right, I said quietly. This isn't the time. I'll go. Mom, wait. Justin's voice was softer now. I'm sorry. I'm just scared and not thinking clearly. I know, honey. Call me when you have news about Arya. I left the hospital with my heart heavy but my mind clear. Arya had played her hand. She tried to get Justin to pressure me into signing over power of attorney by claiming it was for my own protection. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd shown her true intentions while Michael and I were documenting everything. By the time Arya woke up from her accident, we'd have everything we needed to expose her for what she really was. And my son would finally see the truth about the woman he'd married. Arya woke up 3 days later with a concussion and a broken wrist, but otherwise unharmed. I knew this because Justin called me from the hospital, his voice shaky with relief. The doctors say she's going to be fine. She doesn't remember the fall, but that's normal with head injuries. I'm so glad she's okay, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish physical harm on anyone. Mom, I owe you an apology for how I acted at the hospital. I was scared and took it out on you. You don't need to apologize for being worried about your wife. Arya wants to see you, he said, surprising me. She says she feels terrible about how things have been between you two. She thinks maybe her head injury has given her some clarity about what's really important. I doubted that was true, but I agreed to visit. Michael and I had spent the past 3 days preparing for whatever Arya's next move would be, and this felt like it. I found her in a private room, looking pale but alert. Her left wrist was in a cast, and there was a small bandage on her forehead, but she managed a weak smile when she saw me. Debbie, thank you for coming. Justin was sitting in the chair beside her bed, holding her good hand. I'll give you two some privacy, he said, kissing Arya's forehead before leaving the room. How are you feeling? I asked, sitting in the chair he'd vacated. Like I was hit by a truck, Arya said with a rueful laugh. But grateful to be alive. Experiences like this really put things in perspective, you know? I nodded, waiting to see where this was going. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation at the apartment. About the wedding and the misunderstanding with the payments. She shifted in the hospital bed, wincing slightly. I think I might have been too harsh with you. Oh. I was so focused on protecting Justin from what I thought was... from what I thought were some issues you were having. But lying here, I realized that maybe I was wrong. What kind of issues did you think I was having? Arya looked embarrassed. The memory problems. The confusion about who paid for what. But maybe that wasn't confusion at all. Maybe you really did pay for more than I realized. I kept my expression neutral. What are you saying? I'm saying that I think I owe you an apology. And more than that, I think I owe you some recognition for everything you've done for Justin over the years. She reached for a glass of water with her good hand, taking a small sip before continuing. The truth is, Debbie, I've been worried about you. Living alone in that small apartment, working at the grocery store at your age. It doesn't seem right that someone who sacrificed so much for her son should be struggling. I'm not struggling. But you could be more comfortable. More secure. Arya leaned forward slightly. I've been talking to Justin about this, and we want to help. Help how? Well, we think it might be time for you to stop working. You've earned a rest. And we think it might be good for you to have someone help you manage your finances, just to take the pressure off. I manage my finances just fine. Of course you do. But wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about it? To know that someone you trust is making sure everything is handled properly. I felt the familiar chill of recognition. Here it was, the same pitch she'd probably given to Helen Bradley and all the others. What exactly are you proposing? Just a simple power of attorney. Nothing dramatic. It would just mean that Justin could help you with banking, with paying bills, with making sure your retirement funds are invested properly. You'd still have complete control, but you'd have help when you needed it. And why would I need help? Arya's expression became gentle, condescending. Debbie, I know this is hard to hear, but there have been some signs. The confusion about the wedding payments. Some of the things your family members have mentioned about conversations you don't remember having. What conversations? It's not important. The point is, we love you and we want to protect you. The power of attorney would just be a safety net. I stared at her. This woman who had systematically destroyed my relationships and was now offering to help me by taking control of my finances. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. But Debbie, please don't wait too long. These things are easier to handle before they become serious problems. I left the hospital and drove straight to Michael's office. He was waiting for me with a recording device and a detailed plan. Did she make the offer? Power of attorney, just like you predicted. She said it was to help me manage my finances because I'm having memory problems. Perfect. Now we move to phase 2. Michael had been busy during Arya's hospital stay. He'd tracked down David Chun, Robert Martinez, and James Whitmore, 3 of Arya's previous targets. All 3 men were willing to testify about what Arya had done to their families. More importantly, he'd found a local attorney named Sarah Mitchell who specialized in elder abuse cases. Sarah had agreed to help us build a case against Arya that would not only stop her current scheme, but ensure she couldn't victimize anyone else. The key, Sarah explained when we met the next day, is to let her incriminate herself. We need her to take concrete steps toward fraud before we can act. What kind of steps? We need her to produce fraudulent documents, or to lie to a financial institution, or to attempt to access your accounts without authorization. Right now, she's just making suggestions. We set up a trap that was both simple and elegant. I agreed to meet with Arya and Justin to discuss the power of attorney, but I insisted on using my own lawyer to review the documents. The lawyer I chose was Sarah Mitchell. 3 days later, we met at Sarah's office. Arya had insisted on bringing her own set of power of attorney documents, which she claimed were standard forms that would be simpler than having new ones drawn up. Sarah reviewed the documents while we waited, her expression carefully neutral. But I could see the tension in her jaw as she read through the papers Arya had prepared. These are very comprehensive, Sarah said finally. They would give Justin complete control over all of Mrs. Carson's financial accounts, her property, and her medical decisions. Is that unusual? Justin asked. For someone with no diagnosed medical or cognitive issues. Yes, very unusual. Most power of attorney documents are much more limited in scope. Arya shifted in her chair. We thought it would be better to be thorough. That way there wouldn't be any gaps if Debbie needed help. I see. And Mrs. Patterson. I'm sorry, Mrs. Henley. You prepared these documents yourself. I had some help from someone who knows about these things. A lawyer. A legal assistant friend. Someone with experience in elder care issues. Sarah made a note. Could you provide me with the name of this legal assistant? I'd like to verify that these forms comply with state requirements. For the first time, Arya looked uncomfortable. I'm not sure I remember her full name. It was just someone who was trying to help. That's fine. Could you also provide documentation of Mrs. Carson's medical conditions that would necessitate such comprehensive powers? Medical conditions? Yes. The form indicates that Mrs. Carson suffers from progressive cognitive decline and is unable to manage her own affairs. I'd need to see the medical reports that support this assessment. The room went dead silent. Justin looked confused. What medical reports? Mom, you haven't mentioned any medical problems. Aria's face had gone pale. I think there might be some confusion. Those might be standard warnings on the form, not specific assessments. Sarah smiled coldly. Mrs. Henley, these aren't standard forms. These appear to be customized documents that make specific claims about Mrs. Carson's mental capacity. Claims that would need to be supported by medical evidence to be legally valid. I think maybe we should start over with different paperwork, Aria said quickly. Actually, Sarah said, I think we should discuss some other issues first. Mrs. Henley, are you familiar with a Helen Bradley from Ohio? The transformation in Aria's face was immediate and dramatic. All the color drained from her cheeks, and her eyes went wide with panic. I don't know what you're talking about. How about Robert Martinez from Colorado? Or David Chun from Ohio? Aria stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Justin, we're leaving. But Justin wasn't moving. He was staring at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before. Aria, who are those people? No one. This woman is trying to confuse us. Sarah opened a file on her desk. Mr. Henley, these are the names of men your wife was previously engaged to. Men whose mothers died or were financially victimized while your wife was involved with their families. That's not true, Aria said, but her voice was shaking. Mrs. Henley, I have statements from all three men describing identical patterns of behavior. Isolation of elderly mothers, claims of memory problems, attempts to gain financial control through fraudulent power of attorney documents. Justin slowly turned to look at me. Mom, what is this? It's the truth, honey. The truth about who you married. For the next hour, Sarah methodically presented the evidence Michael had gathered. The timeline of Aria's previous relationships. The statements from her previous victims. The pattern of lies and manipulation that had followed her from state to state. Justin said nothing through the entire presentation. He just sat there, his face growing paler as each piece of evidence was revealed. When Sarah finished, the room was silent except for the sound of Aria crying. It's not what it looks like, she said finally. I loved those men. I loved their families. I was trying to help. By lying about their mother's mental capacity? Sarah asked. By isolating them from their support systems? By attempting to steal their assets? I never stole anything. Because you were stopped before you could complete the thefts. But the intent was clearly there. Justin finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Aria, is this true? She looked at him with tears streaming down her face. Justin, I love you. Everything I did was because I love you. Did you target my mother for her money? No. I mean, not at first. I fell in love with you, and then I wanted to protect our future together. By stealing from my mother? By securing our financial stability. Your mother has money just sitting there while we're struggling with student loans and rent. I watched my son's face as the woman he'd married revealed herself completely. The manipulation, the lies, the calculated cruelty, all of it was finally out in the open. You made me believe my mother was losing her mind, he said slowly. She was interfering with our relationship. She was too controlling, too involved in our lives. She sold her house to pay for our wedding. And then she held it over our heads like we owed her something. Justin stood up, his movement sudden and decisive. We're getting divorced. Justin, no. You can't throw away our marriage over this. I can change. I can make this right. You tried to steal from my mother. You lied to me about everything. You turned me against the one person who's always been there for me. He turned to me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I know, honey. I should have believed you. I should have listened. You weren't equipped to see what she was doing. She's very good at it. Sarah cleared her throat. Mr. Henley, I should let you know that we'll be filing a report with the police about the attempted fraud. Mrs. Henley will likely face criminal charges. Arya's tears turned to panic. You can't do this to me. I haven't actually done anything illegal. Attempting to obtain power of attorney through fraudulent means is absolutely illegal, as is the pattern of elder abuse you've engaged in across multiple states. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a bigger one that I could afford after Justin insisted on returning the money from my house sale that they hadn't spent on the wedding. Arya was serving 18 months in prison for attempted fraud and elder abuse charges in 3 states. Justin was in therapy, working through the guilt and trauma of having been manipulated so thoroughly. We had dinner together every Sunday, slowly rebuilding the relationship that Arya had nearly destroyed. I'd kept Michael on retainer to help other families who suspected they were being victimized by financial predators. We'd started a support group for adult children who'd been manipulated into turning against their parents, and for elderly people who'd been targeted by romance scammers and inheritance thieves. But the best part of my new life was the peace. The knowledge that I'd fought back against someone who tried to destroy me and won. The certainty that my son knew the truth about what had happened, and about how much I loved him. I'd learned that sometimes the people who try to break you actually end up making you stronger. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed.